Hi, it's Stephen here. The difference between the North and South has long been established, and it's not just the accents. As a property investor, buying up North is tempting as property prices are more affordable and you can get into a buy-to-let property with a lower deposit amount. Rents can be good, which means you get a good return on your money invested. So the question is, should you be buying cheap houses up North? What are the risks associated with buying up North? And do the benefits outweigh those risks? In this video, I'm going to be going over what are the pros and the cons of buying property up North, what the biggest risks are as a property investor with buying property up North, and whether the returns are worth accepting those risks when buying a buy-to-let property up North. When we're looking at like-for-like property, comparing the North to the South, we can see that the northern property is cheaper than the southern property, and this essentially comes down to supply and demand. Looking at the average property prices across England, we can see that the south is more expensive than the north. There's nearly a 4 times price difference when we're comparing Liverpool to London, which means that you could buy 4 buy-to-let properties in Liverpool to 1 property in London. Historically, this is because there's less population in the north compared to the south, and therefore there's less demand for housing than there would be in the south. More jobs in the south mean that the younger population move from the north to the south to meet the demand for the jobs in the south. This increase in population therefore has an increase on supply and demand in the south, and therefore increases the property prices in the south because there's more people working and there's more people looking for housing. This has a knock-on effect to the north because there's less jobs, there's less demand for housing, and therefore the property prices in the north do not appreciate as much as those in the south. So let's talk about the pros and cons now of buying a buy-to-let property up in the north. So the pros of buying in the north is that you're likely to go and get a better yield up north than you would do in the south. You've also got a potential for some capital growth, but predominantly why buy-to-let investors buy in the north is for cash flow. You're buying an income, you're not buying capital growth. Capital growth generally can't be relied upon in the north. However, saying that, in the last 12 months, capital growth in the north has been amazing. As we can see by looking at this data from the Land Registry, we can see that the top cities that have been performing over the last 12 months for capital growth have been in the north. And surprisingly, as an average, over London hasn't increased in value over the last 12 months. Property prices up north are generally more affordable, and this translates into a lower purchase price, which means that you pay a lower amount of stamp duty because stamp duty is a percentage of that purchase price. This also means then that the deposit that you need to save up for is going to be a lower amount because, again, the deposit is a percentage of that purchase price, and because the property price is cheaper, your deposit and your stamp duty are going to be cheaper. Looking at these rental figures from April 2021 from HomeLet, we can see that the northern regions have actually increased in rent the most out of all the regions that they're looking at there across the UK. And amazingly, London as an average has dropped its rental rates over the last 12 months, over 5%. Buying up north also gives you the opportunity to own multiple rental properties, where you might be able to only afford to buy 1 or 2 buy-to-let property in the south. With that same amount of cash outlay that you'd have to put down as your deposit for that 1 or 2 properties, you could then go and buy 3 or 4 properties up in the north with that same amount of deposit money. From this data that we can see from Rightmove, they're showing us the biggest performers over the last 12 months, where the annual change has been above 11%. We can see that 7 out of the top 10 highest risers are located in the northwest of England. Out of the 19 towns and cities which have experienced double-digit growth since March 2020, 18 are situated in the Midlands or in the north. This has been fueled by the fact that there's been a lack of properties available on the market in the last 12 months, coupled with the stamp duty holiday that was introduced by the government in July 2020. These have all contributed to the recent surge in prices in these areas over the last 12 months. Manchester has also been named the most livable city in the UK by the Economist Intelligence Unit in their annual global survey. So when we're looking at the cons then for buying properties up north, one of the things are repairs and maintenance costs. Now, these repairs and maintenance costs are going to be the same no matter where the property is located. It doesn't matter if it's in the north or in the south, east or west. The cost of a boiler is the same no matter where you're located. And it's the same for fixing roofs, fixing leaks, fixing blocked toilets. All of these costs are the same no matter where the property is, so it doesn't get cheaper just because you're in the north. Therefore, if you're generating a lower amount of cash because your property's up north, the cost of, say, fixing a boiler, which could be £2,000, could wipe out all of your profit for that property in that year. So you may find if you've got maintenance and repair issues, your profits are quickly eroded with buying properties up north. Tenant demand can also be an issue with properties up north because historically there's been less jobs up north, which then can lead to longer vacancy periods where your property is empty and not generating any rent. You may also find tenant quality is an issue because there might be tenants on a lower income and the job security might not be as great as it would be further south because there's less jobs around, and therefore that security of that rent payment each month may not always be as great and secure as it would be if you weren't buying up north. You're likely going to need a property manager to look after your property because I'm assuming that you're not going to be buying in a place that's local to where you're living, and you likely might not want to do any property management yourself. Some people say you should invest where you live, which I don't really agree with. I think as long as you do your due diligence on the numbers and on the property and on the area and on the tenants, doesn't matter where you invest then. You can invest anywhere in the world if you want to, as long as you do your right due diligence. But having a property manager is going to erode your profits with buying a property up north. Probably would have a property manager anywhere, so it's not necessarily a specific one just for buying a property up north. Cheaper houses are generally in areas where there's probably a bit more crime, and therefore this is going to potentially lead for you to have an additional cost when it comes to insurance, additional cost when it comes to security. You might be concerned if you get vacancies that you become susceptible to vandalism, or you might even get squatters and things like that. You might then get into a whole load of litigation to get rid of squatters, and during all of this time you're not generating any rent and you've got a massive void period which is just eroding any profit that you're making from that property. You might find that buying properties up north is actually going to give you more aggravation. And this could be because of the type of tenant that you're getting, or it could be because you can then have multiple properties. The more properties that you're dealing with, you're going to be dealing with property managers, you're going to be dealing with multiple tenants, maybe multiple property managers. So all of these touch points create aggravation. Some may argue that by having more properties, you're mitigating the risk because you're spreading the risk around multiple properties, which in a way it does, because if one of those properties becomes vacant, you've still got another 3 properties, say, out of the 4 that are still income producing. Whereas in the south, if you just had one property and that becomes vacant, you got no rental income anymore. But at the end of the day, having multiple properties generally will mean that you've got more aggravation. So let's talk about the biggest risks that come with buying properties up north. The biggest risks outside the property, actually buying that property, and all the issues that can potentially come around with checking that you're getting a good sound property, is the fact that you might get more tenant hassles and you might get more vacancies. As long as you understand that these are your biggest risks and that you go into it with your eyes wide open, that you're going to be buying in an area where you know if there's a good amount of tenant demand, are you going to have vacancies, are you going to have these void periods between tenants? So you want to be mitigating these risks and talking to different agents about what's the demand for this type of property. Should I be buying a 3-bed or a 2-bed? What's the tenant profile look like? Are they families? Are they young professional couples? Asking these types of questions will help you mitigate that risk and make sure that you buy the right type of property in the right area for the right type of tenant. So let's look at an example then, just to see how the numbers would stack up if we were to buy a property up north and see if we think that the risk is worth the return that we'd get from that type of property. So I picked a location that was on that top list of northern suburbs that have gone up in the last 12 months. And this location is Lee in Greater Manchester. And we got this property on the market for £89,950. And let's say, just for simplistic sake, we're going to get this property for £89,000. Looking at properties that are rented in the area right now, I can find this 3-bed semi-detached property that's rented for £795. This property is slightly better interior compared to the one that we're buying, but for the purpose of this exercise, let's say we can get £795 for our 3-bed semi. So a rule of thumb that a lot of property investors work from is the 1% rule. Now, how this works is that you take the purchase price, you take 1% of that purchase price, and is your monthly rent the same or better than that actual 1% value? If it is, that means that you're probably buying a positive cash flow property. So in this example, we're taking £89,000, 1% of £89,000 is £890 per calendar month is the rent that we want to be achieving for this particular property. But we can see that this fails that 1% rule because we're not getting £890 per calendar month, we can only achieve £795. But let's carry on and just see what the numbers work out to be. So we're working off a purchase price of £89,000. We're then going to have our deposit of 20%, which is £17,800. We've then got some stamp duty, which is going to cost us £2,670, and we're also going to have some legal fees, closing costs, settlement costs, which are going to cost us, let's say, £1,500. So in total, the cash we're going to need is £21,970. We then want to leverage our money, and we're going to get a buy-to-let mortgage at 80%. We can get a rate at 3.29%, with an 80% loan to value, and that mortgage is going to cost us £348 per calendar month. That leaves us with a cash flow of £447 per calendar month. But we're not done there, because we've got additional costs that we need to be included in our numbers. So we've got costs for maintenance and repairs, and let's say that's 10%, and let's round that up to £80 per month. We're also going to have insurance and vacancy rate. Let's say that those two are again another 10%, another £80. We're also going to have a property manager at 10%, so that's another £80. That leaves us with a net cash flow of £207 per calendar month, or £2,484 per year. And that £2,484 a year only leaves us with a 2.79% net yield on our £89,000 purchase price. But one of the most important things that I always look at is what's my cash on cash return. What I mean by this is how much cash am I putting down and how much cash am I getting back from my cash put in. So how we work this out is we take our net return, which is £2,484 per year, divided by our cash down. And our cash down was £21,970. This leaves us with a net return of 11.3%. So while this property failed the 1% rule, when we drilled down a bit further, it actually worked out to be not a bad investment on a cash on cash return basis. Because how many of you wouldn't want to buy a property that generates you an 11.3% return? So one of the questions I always ask myself, which is my investing mantra, is can I make the most amount of money in the least amount of time, the least amount of risk and the least amount of aggravation? And in this case, up in the north of England. Well, you certainly can. As we've shown with this example, is that we can get a return of 11.3% net cash on cash return with this property in Lee and Greater Manchester that's available on the market right now at the time of this recording. There's going to be a certain amount of aggravation with residential buy-to-let properties, whether it's up in the north or whether it's in the south. Not sure if you're going to get more aggravation with properties up in the north, possibly because of tenant quality, but if you're putting a property manager in there to deal with all of those hassles, that's kind of your buffer. And as long as they do a good job and put a tenant in there that pays their rent each month and minimises the void periods, I guess it doesn't really matter where you buy that property. I think the return is then worth that risk. So if I was just starting out and I wanted to generate cash flow, I wanted to generate an income, I'd be looking to buy properties up north because I can get into those properties with a lower cash deposit and get on with my investing journey sooner, rather than wait to save for a larger amount of money. Meanwhile, capital appreciation is happening in the background, and those prices that were at that amount of money, if it takes me another year to save up my deposit for something in the south, I might find that property has now gone up 10, 20, even £50,000 over that time. So if I was just starting out and I wanted cash flow and I wasn't too worried about capital growth, that's just the cherry on the top, that just is a byproduct. My main focus is for cash flow. I'd be looking to buy properties up north. Thanks very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you've watched it all the way through and you've enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel as I talk about property, investing and entrepreneurship. Feel free to follow me on Instagram and see what I'm up to over there, and I'll see you next time.